Imola has been cancelled, and that means F1 is moving swiftly on to the next race, which is the jewel in the Formula 1 crown, and that is Monte Carlo for the Monaco Grand Prix, and that means it's once again time for my preview and predictions. This is a series where I'll be previewing, and then at the end of the video I'll be giving out my early top 5 predictions for the Monaco Grand Prix. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. The vast majority of viewers are not currently subscribed to the channel, and if you're one of those, I would greatly appreciate if you just tapped that little sub button. Now, let's get to the video. As usual, I will be talking about the likes of Red Bull, Aston Martin, Ferrari and Mercedes a little bit later on, so stick around for that. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, the Imola race was sadly cancelled, and that was due to the flooding that has occurred in the Emilia Romagna region of Italy. The flooding is not necessarily at the circuit, although there has been some flooding in the paddock, but nothing compared to what the city of Imola actually has had to go through, and that is why the race was cancelled, as the emergency services were much better used in that part of the city, instead of being at the F1 circus. And that means F1 is now moving on to the Monaco Grand Prix, and guess what? It looks, at least right now, that rain could be following them all the way from Imola to Monaco, which means that the new wet tyres that were set to debut at Imola might actually make their debut at Monaco instead, which for Pirelli is actually somewhat useful, as we may get a lot of necessary data to see if the new wet tyres have improved. That being said, Monaco is not exactly the circuit to test the tyres to their absolute maximum, as the surface is one of the smoothest surfaces of the year, and also the lap speed is one of the lowest average lap speeds of the year, and we can see that when comparing the fastest lap of the 2022 Monaco Grand Prix and, for example, Imola from 2022, so that you can get a bit of a comparison between the two circuits in the dry, which would be similar in the wet as well. The fastest lap in Monaco last year had an average speed of just 160 km per hour, whereas in Imola from last year, the average speed was 225 km per hour. This means that the wets should have naturally been worked a lot harder in Imola had the race gone ahead, but we shall still see how they perform if the race does begin in those conditions. Because of this mixture of smooth surface and very low average speed, tyre wear is virtually non-existent in Monaco. Although last year there was a grand total of 44 pit stops, but that was more down to the changeable weather. In a fully dry race, it would have been a very easy one stop, with the drivers probably going from the medium to the hard compound of tyres. And speaking of that, Pirelli will be, unsurprisingly, taking the C3, C4 and C5 tyres, which are the 3 softest tyres in the Pirelli range. Qualifying is all important around the Monaco streets, as overtaking is virtually impossible. This means that the teams will spend most of their time in practice trying to get the cars perfectly set up for qualifying. This does mean that sometimes we can see a bit of a surprise result, especially if it comes down to a driver getting the right lap at the right time. This mixed with the very low tyre wear means that in qualifying you can expect to see the drivers run multiple laps on one set of tyres. They also run multiple laps because they don't always have enough time in an out lap to generate enough tyre temperature for peak performance and grip. The 2022 pole position lap time was a 1:11.376 by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, and the fastest lap in last year's Grand Prix was a 1:14.693 by Lando Norris in the McLaren. Yep, McLaren actually managed the fastest lap. Something tells me that it will be a bit more of a shock to see them repeat that feat this year. To try and help with overtaking, Monaco features one DRS zone, and that zone is on the run from the exit of the Anthony Nogues corner all the way down the pit straight into Saint-Devote, also known as Turn 1. But this DRS zone does not really provide any opportunity for the drivers to actually overtake, as the cars are way too big for the circuit. That being said, last year there was a surprising 13 overtakes on track. Yet, somehow only 2 of those overtakes was actually shown on the broadcast. Even more staggeringly, only 1 of those 13 overtakes actually took place during the dry phase of the race, which goes to show just how tricky overtaking actually is for modern F1 cars at that circuit. With this in mind, drivers cannot afford to make a mistake during qualifying, otherwise their race will be over before the race even gets underway. With that in mind, let's now take a look at the top 4 teams in the Constructors' Championship And let's start with Ferrari. With Imola being cancelled, Ferrari missed out on the opportunity to race in front of their home fans, and also the opportunity to try out the new parts that are due to come to the car. Ferrari were planning on bringing a new floor and rear suspension. They could still bring this to Monaco, but those streets are not the most ideal place to be testing out brand new components such as suspensions. With likely limited parts on suspension and floors, it will be vital that both Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz keep it out of the wall. With Charles having a few incidents already this season, he needs to try and keep it as clean as possible, especially if the weekend is wet. Ferrari are in a bit of an interesting place. Early on it seemed like they had a lot of bad luck. However, after Miami, it is somewhat clear that there are issues with their car. Hopefully though, this new rear suspension and floor can help with the rear instability that they have been suffering with from time to time, such as when you've seen Charles Leclerc hit the wall in qualifying in Baku for the sprint race, and also with the mistakes that he made in Miami, and also of course the spin that we saw Sainz have very early on in Bahrain. For Mercedes, Imola was a missed opportunity for them to try a new big upgrade as well, as Mercedes, much like Ferrari, were aiming to trial big changes as they are looking to begin closing the gap to the likes of Aston Martin and the Red Bull right in front of them. For Mercedes, the changes are still being brought to Monaco, and they are the following. Mercedes are looking at a new suspension, floor, and also potentially some bodywork changes, and this is what is going to capture the attention of the rival teams, as it is rumoured that Mercedes will finally be looking to ditch the zero pod concept that they have been running since the start of 2022. Monaco could be a very interesting race for the team. Monaco has historically been one of the weaker circuits even during the Mercedes dominance in the early days of the turbo hybrid era, and last year was no exception. One of the weakest areas for the Mercedes team last time out in Miami as well was trying to ride the curbs over the tight and twisty sections of the circuit. Unfortunately for them, Monaco is all tight and twisty sections, so they probably will be relying on their new suspension to try and help them guide them over the twisty streets. If the suspension does not help them, then I fear that Monaco could potentially be a very long and difficult weekend for the Silver Arrows, and we may once again see the likes of Lewis Hamilton going out in Q2. But unfortunately, unlike in Miami, Lewis might find it a lot trickier to find his way through the field. But for George Russell, it seems like he has been able to handle the issues a little bit better than his teammate at certain races. But even so, Mercedes are desperate for a better car, especially in qualifying trim. Their race car has been better than the qualifying car, but given in Monaco it's almost impossible to overtake, they need to make sure they are set up for one lap. For Aston Martin, Monaco presents an incredible opportunity for them. This is the one circuit where top speed does not matter, and it is all about how your car can corner and how strong it is on the brakes. And as Aston Martin has proven for the majority of the year, where they may be lacking in the straight line speed department, they more than make up for on the brakes and through the corners. Fernando Alonso has been a man whose F1 career has been rejuvenated this year, and he is performing at a level similar to what he was able to achieve in his Ferrari days, and I really do believe this weekend is his best chance to take the fight to the mighty Red Bull team. The question is though, are Aston Martin as a team in a position to be ready to fight and make the right decisions at the right time? If it does end up being a weekend where there is rain in the air, then it is all important that Aston Martin and Alonso make the right calls, especially in qualifying, as this is, in my opinion, a golden opportunity to succeed. For Lance Stroll, Miami may have been a bit of a difficult weekend, with being out in Q1, but in Monaco, the Aston Martin has great potential for both drivers to be in the top 5, and Stroll just has to make sure that he is out on the track at the right time and does not get caught out or make any silly mistakes. For Red Bull, they are once again heading into the Grand Prix as the favourites, but I really do think they could be facing an increase in competition from Aston Martin, and also potentially from Ferrari and Mercedes, with those two teams bringing big upgrades. Not only this, but with Monaco being decided mostly on a Saturday, it means that Red Bull need to improve their qualifying. In race trim, no one has been able to touch them, but in qualifying they have been susceptible to mistakes, issues, and at times even the competition, with of course Charles Leclerc taking pole position in Baku. So they just need to make sure that they can be on top of their car to make sure nobody can beat them in qualifying, and if that happens then almost certainly no one will be able to touch them in the race. So the question is then, what are my early predictions for pole position and the top 5? Well, for pole position, I'm going to go for someone a little bit different, as I'm going to say Fernando Alonso will take pole position. Or more, I really want him to take pole position. And for the top 5, I'm going to go for P5 to be George Russell in the Mercedes, P4 will be Carlos Sainz, P3 will be Sergio Perez, Fernando Alonso will finish in second place, and Max Verstappen will win the Monaco Grand Prix, and I have a feeling Charles Leclerc is somehow going to throw away another Monaco Grand Prix weekend, like he seems to do every single year. But the question is though, what do you guys think? Down below in the comments, let me know, and as always, comment, leave a like, and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.